If you're thinking of investing in gold, then this junior explorer in South America might be interesting to you. Hello and welcome to our viewers on cruxinvestor.com. And for those of you new to Crux Investor, please click the button in the corner of the screen and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We spoke earlier today to Marshall Koval. He's the CEO of Luminex Resources, part of Ross Beaty's Lumina Group. We talked to him about the group structure and their track record. They've raised $175 million to date and given back over $1.5 billion to shareholders. We asked him about mining conditions in Ecuador. It's a relatively new jurisdiction for miners. We talk about their shareholders and how the corporate structure breaks down. It's actually quite an interesting story. Plus, he opens up about their JVs with BHP, Anglo American, and First Quantum. So if you want to see any more detail about any of those topics, go to the description below and click on the relevant timestamp and it'll take you to that part of the video. But in the meantime, let's find out what Marshall had to say. Hi Marshall, how are you?
Good today, Matthew. How about yourself?
Not too bad. But now we spoke back in May. We talked about Lumina Gold back then, but today we're going to be talking about Luminex Resources. So why don't you give us a 1-minute summary on that, and then we'll get stuck into some questions.
Yeah, so Luminex Resources was the company we spun out in 2018, and basically we've got a large portfolio of assets, earlier stage exploration in Ecuador, a bit different than the Lumina Gold story, which is a development project. But we've got large-scale exploration properties for copper and gold as well, and then we've got some world-class partners that we JV'd with to do some of the exploration, and we're doing a bit of work ourselves on our Condor project.
Right. Well, let's talk about it. So you're referring, of course, to the Lumina Group, right? So why don't you tell us a bit about that? Because there's a bit of a track record. You've been making money for people. I think you've raised, you told me last time, $175 million and returned $1.5 billion to shareholders. So there's a very positive track record. Why don't you kind of give us the highlights?
Lumina Group was founded sort of in 2003 by Ross Beaty, who took a view on copper. So went out and acquired a lot of world-class assets, and it was sort of an option play originally. And as time went on, you control these projects, you have work commitments, and basically the long and the short was raised about $175 million, like you mentioned, and returned $1.5 billion to shareholders.
So thanks for that summary on the group, Lumina Group, and obviously with Ross Beaty's involvement, that gives you access to capital and reputation as well. Plus, you obviously have delivered as a management team. But with Luminex Resources, it's a relatively small market cap right now. It's early days. You're also involved in Lumina Gold. What's your where are you spending most of your time?
So right now it's been about a 50-50 split for me. We're advancing the Lumina Gold Congrejos project towards pre-feasibility studies. So there's a lot of technical engineering work, field work. So I've been working on that. But also I've been front and center on all these deals with BHP, Anglo American, First Quantum that we have joint ventures with in Ecuador. And right. The combined amount of those deals is about 140 million committed to copper exploration, sort of between 2018 and 2025.
Great. Well, let's come on to that in a second. So just help people understand. So why have you spun out Luminex Resources from Luminex Gold? They're both gold companies.
Yeah, so basically our philosophy is we're an exploration development group. We tend to try to acquire large-scale projects like the Congrejos project in Lumina Gold. And basically the idea is to add value, de-risk these, and move these on to somebody that would build the projects. It's basically the same model as Lumina Copper. So what we had is when Ecuador opened up their concession system and granted new concessions, we acquired, even though we were a gold company, we acquired quite a few copper early stage exploration projects. So by spinning Luminex out, we have a core asset in the Condor project, which has about 1.4 million ounces of gold in indicated and 2.5 in inferred. But we also had these early stage copper exploration projects. So rather than going to the market and diluting our shareholders, we went and did JVs with 3 major companies to explore these copper assets.
Let's get into that, because as I know, I can see Condor, Turkey, Pegasus, and Orquídeas. Do you want to tell us? Do you want to break those down? Just kind of what each one involves, what your commitments are, and what do you think you're trying to do? Because I think what our audience is really interested in is what you're thinking, what your strategy is. What are your plans for these? Because I get that you're an explorer developer, and then you move things off or partner with other people to produce. So if you don't mind.
Yeah, so these copper assets we were pretty opportunistic. We had a lot of information in Ecuador, and when the concession system auction came up, we acquired all these projects: Tarqui, Pegasus, Orquídeas, and Cascas. And then we did initial work ourselves. We have a team of over 20 geologists in Ecuador, so we did a lot of the basic exploration work beyond what was already known about these projects. And we advanced them to the point where we actually didn't go out and solicit companies to do deals. This was all inbound. So the first deal we did was with First Quantum on Orquídeas and Cascas. Right now, First Quantum is in the field. We're the operator of the project, but working closely with First Quantum. We've got 5 drill holes in and about 1,500 meters of drilling so far. So that deal with First Quantum, they have to spend $38.5 million over 5 years to earn 51%. And they can earn an additional 19% if there's a discovery, and they carry us to a production decision.
So they can earn up to 70%, subject to them paying up for that, and obviously getting through to construction. But what's in it for you? I mean, obviously they're paying your OpEx, and you'll get 30% of this thing, but 30% of what?
Yeah, so if there's 2 deposits, the Orquídeas, which is being drilled now, and that's to the north, and then the Cascas to the south. And these are large copper anomalies, we've identified with geochem and geophysics, and they're about 5 kilometers by 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers wide, both of them. So basically, if there's a major discovery, and these are straight copper projects, no gold, then we've got the potential, and with Ross's involvement in our group, if there's a major discovery, we could participate in the 30% if it gets to construction, or we have the option to sell out that portion. There's a lot of groups, a lot of the Japanese companies like Sumitomo, for instance, that would look at buying a 30% interest in a major copper mine. So it gives us leverage to the upside is basically the idea with all these.
So explain those numbers then. So First Quantum put in 38.5 over the next 5 years. They get 51%. Are you putting in any additional cash?
No, they have to. It's a straight earn-in JV. So after they spend the 38.5, they earn the 51% in the JV company. And then if they advance it through feasibility study, and construction, we're carried for the next 19%. And then when you get to 70%, that's when we would have to put our pro rata in.
Right. Okay. So that's great optionality for you on that deal. So that was the first deal. Let's go to the second deal.
Yeah. So Anglo American is a bit different approach. So on the First Quantum deal, it was 2 specific deposits that had been identified. Anglo took a broader scale. So the Pegasus A and B is our largest land position in Ecuador. And let me just say this: we're the 2nd largest concession holder in Ecuador. And the Pegasus A and B is the largest concession that we have. So we have about 135,000 hectares of mineral concessions, and Pegasus is about 65,000 hectares. So Anglo's view is a bit different. They're looking at a broader regional district sort of scale. There's copper porphyry and some gold showings that we've identified in the area. So Anglo's approach is more systematic, broader regional scale exploration. So the deal we have with Anglo is 57, they have to spend 57.3 million over 7 years. They earn 60%, and they can earn an additional 10% if they carry us to a construction decision. So right now, they're in the process of a lot of field geochemical work. They're getting ready to fly a geophysical survey over the entire land package to look at, prospective terrain. And so that's basically the Anglo deal. We're really excited to have both these and BHP too as partners.
Well, yeah, I bet that 1, access to capital, but 2, these are names that people trust as well. So it lends some level of comfort to investors, right? Okay, so that's a slightly earlier stage project, but again, because we're talking about 7 years for this earning period, and then you've got BHP.
So BHP's deal we just closed in the last month, and basically BHP. So let me back up. Anglo is the operator on the Anglo deal. First Quantum, Luminex is the operator, and on the Tarqui project, BHP is the operator, and Tarqui's in the area of Mirador, which is a copper mine that's in construction right now. So it's in a highly prospective copper belt. And this is a small land package compared to the other ones. But we made a discovery out there, and it looks pretty promising. It's some of the best copper terrain that we've found in Ecuador through the work that we've done. So basically the deal with BHP is they have to spend $42 million over 6 years to earn 60%. And after that, they can earn an additional 10% by spending another $40 million. And that should take you roughly through a feasibility study if there's a discovery there. So basically, that's the idea is these are large targets, large anomalous areas that we found in the field. And we're putting off risk to these first-class partners to advance these projects. And then, so that leaves us, our primary focus after these three partnerships is our Condor project in, most of these assets are in southeastern Ecuador. The only one that's up in the central area is Anglo American. And, you can see all of our holdings on slide number 5. You can see where these different properties are in the country. But let me just go back to Luminex. So we just announced high grade discovery at Luminex or at Condor, sorry. And Condor is interesting because it's a large land package. The northern part of the property is epithermal gold deposit, and the southern part is gold copper porphyry. And we just made a high grade discovery at the camp zone, and we've drilled 4 holes into it now. And so that's pretty exciting. We put a couple press releases out in the last month or two, and we can get into some details on that lately. So right now we have 1 drill at Condor, and we're drilling at Condor, but we think we made a significant discovery beyond the known resources that have been reported to date there.
So these are all relatively early stage projects in the scheme of things. Hence the market cap. Your market cap is quite low, and I guess the BHP explains the bump in the share price this month. You went from 70 to 90, I think 92 today. So these partnerships that you've been creating, how long did they take to actually come to fruition? How long do these conversations last?
These are big companies and these are complicated deals because basically you're structuring an earn-in agreement, royalty agreements, JV agreements, and assuming that you have a producing property. So there's a lot of paper and there's a lot of negotiations involved. But generally they've sort of taken 9 months to 12 months to go from initial interest to negotiation to closing the properties. But I want to add one thing on it isn't just these deals that helped move the share price recently. I think the discovery we made at Condor at the camp zone has also helped move the share price as well.
Well, it being what?
So basically what we announced were 3 drill holes in the camp zone area. And to give you an idea, these are near surface outcrops. And then we drilled down to sort of 200, 300 meters. And to give you an example, in the first drill hole we drilled, we had a true width interval of 30 meters. That was 4.77 grams per ton gold. And the second hole we drilled, it was a similar sort of thing, 25 meters at 2.49 gold. And within that, there was an interval of 9.6 meters of 6 gram gold. So, if you look at the mineralization there, It's pretty wide zones, and it's got some similar aspects to mineralization that we see up at Fruta del Norte. And so we just announced a third hole, and that had 25-meter true width of 4.5 grams per ton gold. So these are structures that outcrop at the surface, and we've been able to define them down to a depth of 200, 300 meters. So right now we're drilling those, and I think that's this discovery has a lot of momentum that could potentially move the share price if we continue to have success there.
How much of your market cap would you attribute to the deals you've done with First Quantum, Anglo, and BHP versus your own project? How would you break that down?
Obviously there's optionality to the resources that we have. We have roughly 4 million ounces of gold at Condor. Again, it's exploration stage, sort of advanced exploration, not development. But I think it's really hard to break it down. But I think if you look at when we first announced the deal with BHP, the share price moved up to about 85% or 85 cents, and then the market settled back down. And I think most of the run, the 70 to 92, had more to do with the camp zone. So, maybe we're seeing about half of our value from the Condor asset and maybe the other half from these JVs. It's a hard thing to pin down, but that would be my guess.
Okay. And any more deals coming through? Any more
No,
conversations started?
we continue to get inbound interest, and it's kind of interesting. I think what's happened in Ecuador is, as we all know, it's sort
Well,
of...
tell us about Ecuador. Tell us about Ecuador, okay? Because it's a relatively new mining jurisdiction, all right? It's mostly agriculture. So how have you been getting on?
Yeah, there's been some historical mining in primarily for gold in areas like Suruma and other parts of the country. But basically, the country had a moratorium on new concessions being offered in 2008. And basically, they had punitive fiscal regimes. So that kind of shut the industry down. And I think it hit the bottom basically in 2014 when Kinross decided to back out of the Fruta del Norte deal. And, that was a world-class gold project. And I think what the government had was a budget of about $100 a barrel oil. They've primarily been oil producer was most of the economy besides agriculture. And when that happened, when oil went down to sort of 40, 50 bucks in that range, it really blasted the economy of the country. And Correa was the president at the time, and he was actually the guy that shut down mining. And he realized that he needed to open mining back up because they needed foreign direct investment. And that was the best opportunity to get it. So if you fast forward, this was sort of 2014, things started opening up. We were in the country around 2013, thinking that things were going to get better, looked at a lot of stuff, worked with the government to tell them that they needed to improve their fiscal regime. And so after the Kinross deal collapsed, Lundin Gold acquired Fruta del Norte, and Lundin and several other companies pushed on the government to get a better fiscal regime. So as we sit today, the fiscal regime is workable.
What does that mean? What's that mean? Are we in terms of tax, royalties, etc.?
Basically, if you look at the sort of effective tax rate in the region, a country like Chile is got the best fiscal regime, and it's sort of 38 to 40% of the rents, if you like to call it that, of a project go to the government. If you go up to Peru, it's sort of 45 in that range, and Ecuador's up around the 50%, right? So basically, that change from sort of this, windfall taxes 70%, and a lot of other issues that Ecuador had. Ecuador was probably up in the mid 60s. So the fiscal changes that they made sort of made it so that the major mining companies, guys like BHP's, First Quantum, Anglo American, Newcrest, a lot of other players have come into the country and they're comfortable enough with the fiscal regime to invest.
Actually, so just so quickly on that, you took the Minister for Mines recently to Australia, did you not?
Yeah, he was. We didn't do it ourselves, but he was over.
Was that with Newcrest?
Yeah, I believe
Yeah.
so.
Right. Okay. I didn't know. So you mentioned Newcrest there, and I noticed that he'd been to one of their the big. I can't quite remember the name of the project, but I think he was looking at something to sort of understand the scale and scope of what this could become in his country. Right. Okay. Cool. Can we just talk about shareholders, please? I know you've mentioned Ross Beaty. Obviously, you've been working with him a long time. You guys made a lot of money for yourselves, but also shareholders. What's the breakdown here for Luminex? Who's in it?
Yeah, so if you look on page 6, that kind of gives you the stock info.
Sure, but it doesn't tell me who.
If you look at management and insiders, we have about 24% of the company. Ross has 15.4% himself. I've got it right around 4%, and then the balance is the rest of the management team. But also we have some institutions that have come into our last financing. We have guys
where are they from?
Mainly in the U.S.
Okay, U.S.
And also there was some in Dubai. But basically what we have is we have a group of friends and family that have followed Ross and the group for quite a while. So if you look at it from that perspective, we pretty much know where probably about 50% of the stock is pretty close to the group.
Right, but the rest of it's Canadian retail?
Canadian retail and U.S. You know, we just recently listed on the OTCQX.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah.
Has that made a difference?
You know, we see a lot more activity in the U.S. and the U.S. has always been important. You know, two of the funds that have come in pretty substantial ways into both Lumina Gold and Luminex are California based, so that's an important aspect for us.
Right, and what are you doing with the? I mean, you got to kind of move it kind of up. We need more volume. We need more liquidity. Need more trading. Hence OTC, I guess. But what else are you doing to kind of get this promoted? Because I know when we spoke last about Lumina Gold, you were starting a process. I mean, how are you doing that with Luminex and Lumina?
Yeah, so Luminex, you know, given that there's about 50% that we know of that's sort of long-term investors with the group in the story, that doesn't leave a lot of free float out in the markets. So one of the things we're doing quite a bit is we're marketing in Europe, the US, and Canada, and we're targeting sort of the retail investors. I think that's going to be an important aspect going forward. And also, we've seen some funds that we're buying in the market. You know, we just completed a financing, and you know, right now we have about 7.5 million in cash on hand. So we're cashed up pretty good to move things forward. So we're not out marketing looking to raise money, but we're continuously, Scott Hicks and myself are continuously working with investors, and we have a large focus on the retail investors now. So,
and what does that mean? When you say you've got a large focus on retail, what does that mean to you? What are you doing? Are you going to conferences? Are you doing press releases?
We've done a lot of town halls, and it's kind of interesting, and it's mainly focused on retail investors. And we've got a pretty broad reach. It's not just the U.S., Canada, but we're seeing investors in Europe participate in these. And, you know, we've had, you know, over 100 people at a time. And so we're reaching out continuously like that. And, you know, we're going to conferences, like we're at the Sprott conference in Vancouver next week. And we have a booth there. And so we're really trying to get the story out as broadly as we can, because I think we're still in the early stages here. And you know, obviously every CEO you're going to talk to is going to tell you that his stock's undervalued. But I think there's real, even with the move up into the 90-cent range, we still have, you know, sort of a $47, $48 million market cap. And any one of these projects we have significant success on, we'll see a substantial move from this point.
Where do you see the value coming in? Okay, you got some big names associated. They're spending, nearest down at 140 million bucks on some projects for you. You'll still be left with a reasonable chunk of the companies or the projects after that. But how much of this is Ross's company, and how much is the board actually doing in terms of making decisions? Because I look at Anfield Gold. Obviously, that's gone into Equinox along with a couple of other projects to create a super project. 800 million market cap for Ross there and Equinox. Lumina Gold sitting at around 170, 180 million bucks market cap today. Luminex 35, 40. Okay, so is it a case of you take these things through following a plan, or are you, because of the nature of your business, explorer, developer, you're a little bit more free flowing than that? It's a case of other opportunities to maximize value. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the value drivers for us in Luminex is going to be exploration success, adding resources and making discoveries. So a good example of that would be the discovery at the camp zone. It was never drilled. It's right underneath our camp at Condor. Geologists from several companies, this project's been around since the 80s, trampled over the area. And, we had one of our geologists see some interesting rocks in a road cut and started to focus in doing work. He did sampling and trenching work. So it was a brand new discovery. And, the drilling results that I mentioned to you earlier, we have a discovery there. Now, given the size of it, you could have the potential for 1 million, 2 million ounce deposit.
It does create value, but I'm more interested in the decision making. So Ross Beaty, big guy, big name, reputation, he's got access to capital, all that good stuff, right? With Anfield, rather than grow it yourself, it was a question of, well, we could, or I can roll it into something over here. What do the shareholders of Anfield get out of the Equinox deal?
Yeah, so I'm on the board of Equinox with Ross and several other board members. So that was a deal where, we had the Coringa deposit and we had some other assets. And at the end of the day, Coringa turned out to be a small project that'll be a mine someday. But, there's a management issue. It takes as much effort to manage a small operation like that as it does a big project. So the idea there was Anfield was going to be the vehicle we used to build a gold production company. That's what Ross wanted to do. But at the end of the day, Ross put a deal together that formed Equinox, and we had about 50 million cash in Anfield. And the idea there was to take the assets, the Aurizona mine, which is a brownfield site in Brazil, and the Castle Mountain project in California, and advance those. And so Equinox became that vehicle instead of Anfield. And today we've got 2 producing mines in Equinox, and we've got a 3rd mine, Castle Mountain, that's going to be put into production soon. So that was the idea, and that was a producing story. So if you go back to your question about the board, so we have a pretty sophisticated board. Myself and John Wright handle a lot of the technical aspects, and John's the ex-president of Pan American Silver. He's a technical guy. He's on the board of Silvercrest and Arrow Copper. And Dave Farrell, for instance, he's a capital markets guy. He's on the board of Fortuna. Don Shumka is on the board, and he's experienced audit committee guy. He's ex-Ray J. He's been on the board of several large mining companies. And then we have Lyle Broughton, who's our government attorney, and he's involved in government. And so basically the mandate of the board is let's try to maximize the value that we have in these assets. Let's go out and explore. Let's find projects. Let's advance those projects. And that's measured, advancing these projects by de-risking them and moving them along towards the development chain. So if you look at the Condor project, for instance, with this recent discovery, we're planning on drilling 2,300 meters here. We're having a second drill rig come to site. And if that starts to pan out, then we start to look at this thing as a development project and put it on the path towards a PEA. Right. So that's where value will be created besides just outright discovery. So then if you look at the copper portfolio, the BHP, the Anglo American, and the First Quantum deals, that's going to be large-scale copper porphyry deposit discovery if it happens. And given the prospective terrain we'll think out of those deals that you'll see some sort of major discovery. At least that's what we're hoping for.
So how do you guys pay yourselves? How do you reward yourselves, incentivize yourselves? Because you've only got 52 million shares here. So how's that work?
So when you look at it, the board doesn't get paid. We get options. The option grants are pretty modest.
So no salary. No salary.
Not for the board, no. Myself and the management team that run the company day to day get a salary. But if you look on page 6 there, for instance, issued and outstanding shares, we got 52 million after this last financing. If you look at it on a fully diluted basis, it's 55 million. And we don't do warrants. We'll do a discount to market financing. So basically, there's not a lot of dilution. And like I say, we're tight on options. So really, the upside in these financings, most of the management team participate in the financings, and they have all the way through the various ones we've done, both in Lumina Gold.
At market.
At market. Well, at market along with the other investors, right?
You see, this is what fascinates me about some companies. They just get it right. You say, you don't have many shares out. What you're saying is the cost of your money is cheaper than most. You don't need to do warrants, so you don't do warrants. Okay, you've got I imagine a Rolodex, to use an old terminology from your previous days, where you talk about money from Dubai, talking about money from California. You got the institutions. They all know Ross Beaty. They know your management team, right? So you're not paying more than you need to, and this is really important for funding a company.
Let me take that to the next level, because we have an anti-dilutive mindset. And obviously, when you're an exploration group and you don't have income from operations, you rely on the capital markets to finance as you go. But this last financing, we were oversubscribed by more than $1.5 million. And we didn't want to go there. So we cut it back. And our philosophy is, don't go out to the markets and raise any more money that you need. Given the success of the group, obviously with Ross's leadership there, we have the ability to finance when we need to. So we try to minimize shareholder dilution. And like I said earlier, management and board members all participate in the financing. And Ross is usually the lead order when we do a financing. So that's a pretty strong message to the market.
It's a fantastic message to the market. And then on top of that, the types of deals that you've recently done with obviously First Quantum, Anglo and BHP in terms of funding projects and leaving yourself with a meaningful position at the end of it. That's also great news for investors in terms of optionality. Okay. Fantastic on the money and the remuneration side of things. You've talked to us about Ecuador, mining in Ecuador. Do you think that the retail market understand the Ecuador story? Because most people don't know it. And if I'm looking at the chat rooms, forums, various social media, there's not a lot of talk about you. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we've been through. So if you look at the Lumina copper story, Ross took a view back in sort of 2003 that copper at the time was 85 cents. It was going to go to $2. So he went out and he acquired 10 really solid assets in mining-friendly jurisdictions. And, so in the initial days, it was pretty quiet. And they went out and acquired these projects. And we were in a building stage with both Lumina Gold and then when we spun Luminex out. So we've flown in the investor market a bit under the radar as we kind of consolidated things. Now we've sort of consolidated our land position in Ecuador. The majors have come in and they have to do deals with groups like ourselves because all of the highly prospective properties in the country are in some junior ownership. So basically what you have is a lot of these companies have to come to us, right? So basically we've been quiet because we've been in the building stage. Now the story's changed. We've got our position, we've got good prospects, we've got funding in place. we put off a lot of exploration risk on these major companies that are really good technically, that can move our projects forward. We can focus on Condor. We also have 3 other projects, one called Kimi, Tres Picachos, and La Canela, that are copper plays that we're continue to do early stage exploration work. So, we're in a really good position to move forward and not dilute the shareholders. I mean, if all these JVs go through and $140 million is spent on these projects and there's discoveries, we would have diluted the hell out of our company to raise that kind of money to do it ourselves.
No, I think it's smart, and obviously, mining copper, mining gold, similar skill sets. You've got all the relevant skill sets you need in house. Why don't you finish off and tell us, give investors and retail investors, new investors, reasons that Ecuador is a good place to be, and why you think the way that you've structured these deals is going to work.
Yeah, so listen, Ecuador is the last kind of unexplored, geologically significant terrain in Latin America and probably the world. So there hasn't been a lot of systematic exploration in Ecuador because basically with the moratorium that happened in 2008, Ecuador sat out the majority of the super cycle that we went through, and basically it was shut down for business. Now it's open for business. From a political risk perspective, I think the best indication that it's a viable jurisdiction is that all these major mining companies have started to come into the country. There's 2 mines that'll be put into production by the end of this year. Fruta del Norte is one, and then Mirador is the other. And Mirador is owned by Tongling Mining as the operator and a partner. And Mirador is a large copper porphyry deposit, and Fruta del Norte that Lundin Gold has is a large underground gold deposit. So the prospective nature of Ecuador has come to fruition with these projects being built. And there's a significant pipeline of discoveries in the country. The Cangrejos work that we're doing, Sol Gold has a real good project, and there's a lot of interest. So Ecuador is now a mining jurisdiction. And there's growing pains that go with it. Both the government's learning, the communities, dealing with the communities, we're educating communities along the way. So that's part of the story. But it's geologically, it's great exploration. I'm an explorationist by training, and I haven't seen as much prospective ground anywhere else in the world that hasn't been systematically explored.
Right.
So then if you go for the reasons that it makes sense for Luminex within the country, we've got $140 million of non-dilutive financing coming from our partners. And, we have 4 million ounces of gold on the books already at Condor, and we've made a major discovery at the camp zone. And then, like you were talking about before, we've got a management team that's been there, done this before. Our business strategy is to add value to these assets, not be the producer, move them on to somebody to put them into production, and then exit. So if you look at the Lumina copper story, that's where shareholders, did really well when we exited these companies successively. So we've got the ability to finance. We've got the technical team. We've got a really strong in-country team in Ecuador. So I think we'll be successful in advancing these projects. And I'm really excited about the prospects in Ecuador.
Okay, so that said, you need liquidity in the business. You need a bit more turnover, kind of drive this price up. What type of investor are you looking for?
Listen, I think we're looking for the investors that understand the high-risk nature in Luminex of exploration. I think, and they understand being patient, that discoveries will reward shareholders. And so I think we're still, we started to see a positive gold move recently. When we went into the country, we were looking at sort of $1,100, $1,200 gold. We're up in the 1,400 range now. We haven't seen junior equities like ourselves move up as much as the gold price recently as kind of a general rule. So I think we're still at an early investment stage that as if a shareholder comes in and as we de-risk these projects, makes more discoveries, we should see upward movement in a positive gold price environment. Plus also we have the optionality on copper.
Yeah. And do you think liquidity and volume correlate with long-term holders?
I think if you look at free float of the stock, we do have a lot of long-term holders, and that's why you don't see large volumes. I mean, if we hit 300,000 shares trading in a day, that's pretty good. So the liquidity issue is definitely something that puts a bit of a lid on the upward movement right now. But positive news will move the stock, and the more we reach out and get the story out to the broader retail base, institutions, we should see things improve.
You may have to consider issuing more stocks soon, huh?
Yeah, but that's the issue that we were talking about earlier, that non-dilutive mindset. But you're right.
At some point, you got to break free, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to do it when you're in a bit more control, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, Marshall, thanks very much for the update. Fantastic news. Appreciate your time. Do stay in touch and let us know how it's going.
Yeah, enjoy the weather out there, Matthew. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much for watching. We hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, please click the button in the corner of the screen to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also catch us on our website, cruxinvestor.com, and Cruxcast, our podcast series. Plus, most days you can catch us on LinkedIn and Twitter. We'd love getting your feedback, so please keep that coming, and we'll speak to you again soon.